Expect the shipping forecast to come on. So, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a lovely evening and that you all enjoyed the party, sponsored by CCP. Thanks to them for that. And not feeling too worse for wear. Looking around the room, good, healthy looks. That's great. Straight after the conference finishes, there will be a barbecue over at the Baltic Centre, and that's sponsored by Blue GFX and Autodesk. Also, from a housekeeping perspective, if you could just turn your phones off. I think we only had 2 going off yesterday, so that would be much appreciated. Yesterday, brilliant sessions were sort of probably more businessy focused, although it felt very casual in the way that they were delivered. Today, we've got a sort of more eclectic mix of people. We're going to start off with Alistair Aitcheson. Alistair is exactly who Will Wright described as one of the up-and-coming young designers that he really looks forward to seeing what they come up with. He graduated in 2010 with a maths degree, a maths master's, and then went on to write Greedy Bankers, which was published 6 months later. Fantastically ambitious. And more recently, he's released the multiplayer iPad game Slamjet Stadium. So, can we welcome Alistair?
I think that's me. And now this is me. Hi everyone, I'm Alistair. I'm an independent games developer, and yeah, I'm going to be talking to you about something that's very close to my heart because it's all about the games that I'm making that I find myself fascinated by as a designer. It's about multiplayer on a shared tablet. I'll start off by just giving you a bit of background on who I am. I work, as Charles said, I'm a one-man team, graduated in mathematics, and then went straight out of this into being a full-time indie game developer. So I do all my own art, I do all my own programming, do all the whole business marketing, all of that as well, self-publishing. I really take it on as a kind of one-man enterprise. And I've been doing this for the past 3 years. Focusing mostly on iOS so far, so I've been putting out games for iPhone, games for iPad, and over that time I've managed to gradually build up a bit of an audience, developed 30 under 30. I was selected for that selection in 2011, and I've been given talks about what I do, taking my games to events and expos and trying to get the word out about them. So, in terms of the games that I've made, the big one really, Greedy Bankers has kind of been a franchise in a way for me. It was a series of games that I launched myself onto the App Store with, and I kind of tried to make my name out of. The rules of the game are fairly simple. You've got these gems, which you need to group them into squares and rectangles. The bigger they get, the more they're worth. You tap them to cash them in. And the game is very much about that kind of emergent strategy, about trying to maximize your revenue in the game, which is effectively standing in for points, but doing this by maximizing your use of the space and meeting the bank manager's demands, and that's where the whole kind of banking theme comes into it. Greedy Bankers versus the World is the real big one in this kind of area of local multiplayer, because I added in a multiplayer mode to the game which is exclusive to the iPad, where 2 players share the game board, and they're encouraged to cheat and steal from each other and really play dirty. So just to give you a brief overview of the basic starting rules of that game, you're grouping the gems into rectangles. As I said, you're tapping them to cash them in. The bigger the gems are, the more they're worth. You're racing against the clock and or in the multiplayer version, you're racing against your friend. You want to make the target first. Once you make the target, then your opponent has 10 seconds to catch up. Otherwise, they're out and you are the greediest banker. So the whole stealing mechanic was a real big deal in the game design. What happens is players, you see the image up there, and what you're doing is you've got gems on your side, you tap them on your side, they go into your vault. You've got gems on your opponent's side, they tap them on their side, it goes into their vault. It can't tell whose hand is whose, so it scores it based on the location of the gems. Are they on the left-hand side? Are they on the right-hand side? But if you're on the right-hand side and you reach over to the left, you can drag the gems over onto your side, stealing them, and everything you steal goes up in value. You get a points bonus for it. So greed is good. You know, you're encouraged to be greedy, you're encouraged to be sneaky, you're encouraged to get physical, get in each other's way, mess each other up. And players really latched onto that. I took it to Eurogamer Expo, where it was in the Indie Games Arcade. I took it to Game City in Nottingham. I've taken it to the Bit of All Right festival in London last year. Players love stealing from each other. There was this moment when they realized not only could they do it, but there was an encouragement to do it, that players' eyes would light up. And this was really exciting. They like to invade each other's space. They like to get in each other's way. There's almost a kind of taboo-breaking thing where you feel like you're cheating the system. The game shouldn't let you get away with it. If it knew that you weren't the player, on the left-hand side, you're actually the player on the right-hand side, surely it wouldn't let you do it. But you can get away with it because the iPad can't tell whose hand it is. So there's an excitement to that kind of getting in each other's way. You've also got the fact that other player that you're playing against, they're really important. They are part of the game world that you're playing in, because you have to dodge their hands, you have to push their hands, you have to spot the gem that you can get that's going to be really valuable for you, and where they're not going to be able to stop you. And compared to a game which you play multiplayer with a controller, in many ways, you may as well be playing against a really, really good AI. Whereas with this kind of experience, where you're both huddled over the same board, you're both sharing the same space, and it really matters that you can look the other person in the eye, that you know the nuances of their movement, that you know how they interact as human beings. And players got competitive over it. Players would tell their friends about the game, and 10 minutes later, they'd be coming back with a new group of friends saying, you have to try this out. These two guys in the picture, this was at Game City in Nottingham, they got so competitive over the game that they actually started wrestling on the floor. One of them managed to pin the other guy down, and once the other guy was pinned down on the floor, he quickly gets up, runs back to the iPad, finishes off his side of the board, and wins the game. Now that's a moment. That's a story that you can go home and tell your friends about. So really, when you are making multiplayer games for a shared iPad space, you it's a question I find myself getting asked a lot, and it's a question that I feel you really have to tackle as a designer, is won't players get in each other's way? Surely that's a bad thing. And there's various ways that you can get around that. You can split it up so each player has a tiny little corner of the screen to work with, and that's their room for interaction. Or you can make it so that the control scheme is kind of very limited, so that everyone keeps to their own zone. Or you can say, yes, players will get in each other's way. I want them to get in each other's way. Getting in each other's way is part of the fun. So really, once I had greedy bankers out there, I was kind of itching to try kind of new game designs that really allowed people to do this, allowed people to get in each other's way, and really promoted the kind of the physical play space around a tablet. And that's how Slamjet Stadium came about. So yeah, it says coming soon on the picture. It's actually out now. It came out in March. So Slamjet Stadium is shared screen tablet multiplayer game. It is the future's most popular and most dangerous sport. Football played on hover bikes. There's traps, there's tricks. You're meant to mess each other up. You can grab each other's players and use them as your own. Very much the style of the visual style was really based around kind of, I guess, futuristic death sports, kind of rollerball and things like that. Really, the idea that, I wanted it to have a setting where this sense of, meanness and schadenfreude and, ooh, that's gotta hurt, that kind of feeling was, in the vibe of the game right from when you start it out, so that you are in the right mindset to play once you start playing against another human being. It's done pretty well so far. It got a great critical reception. Pocket Gamer gave it a gold award, which was absolutely wonderful, because I know they don't give out a lot of those, so that was really lovely to find out. And it was selected for New and Noteworthy, first in the USA, and then 2 weeks later it was in New and Noteworthy in the UK, France, Germany, countries in South America, the rest of Europe, Asia, really around the world, to be honest. And yeah, that was pretty exciting. So the way you play is you're grabbing the characters with your fingers. You grab them with your finger, you pull back with your hand to charge up their engines, and then you let go to send them flying across the screen. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to hit the ball into the goal. But you can use your opponent's characters. You can, because the gamepads, the iPads, can't tell whose finger is whose, there's nothing to stop you from using your opponent's characters. You can throw each other into traps when they appear. There's rounds that come on where traps come on and a point is awarded to the player who survives rather than the player who's good at hitting balls into goals. And there is a lot of encouragement to physically get in each other's way, physically push each other around, mess each other up, control the space with your hands, get in each other's way. And of course there's power-ups and stage hazards, which are really there not so much to kind of, give you the edge in a kind of traditional sense, but really to just change the flow of gameplay. So there's always a sense of surprise. There's always something going on, always something, the gameplay in 5 seconds' time is going to be different. Like, what you're focusing on is going to be different to what you were focusing on 5 seconds ago. And players, when I took it to live events, which I did a lot of for testing, most of the kind of ongoing feedback I got on the game when I was testing it, seeing what mechanics work and things, I would take it to events. So the Game City team was very good for it because I showcased it at their event up in Nottingham while it was in a prototype stage, and then again when they took their show on tour to Bristol, I took the game there, got a lot of feedback. Also down the pub. The pub was a brilliant place to test these kind of games out because the atmosphere is just right. It's very casual, very jokey, and as long as no pints get spilt over the device, then everyone's happy. So people got more pumped over this game. And part of it was because it was a lot simpler to get into. You would learn to play the game a lot quicker. You would be, rather than having to learn the sort of puzzle mechanics before you could really get much benefit out of stealing from each other, you could learn the basic controls very quickly. And then, within about, tended to be within about 30 seconds during most tests, that one of the two players would realize, hey, it can't tell if I if I pick up the other team's guys. And there's also a lot more varied movement in the game, so you are moving your hands literally around the whole space on the board. Players seem to, really get involved in that. And generally, I felt I was a lot happier with the pacing and that sense of surprise that I was talking about, where the game is constantly changing. So, why is physical multiplayer such a big deal? Why am I so excited about the idea of sharing a tablet screen between two people and having them having them play a game on one shared device? Well, firstly, I think there is something that has been lost in time. A sense of sharing multiplayer gaming is something that I know I used to do a lot of with my friends when I was a kid, playing games like Micro Machines, playing games like GoldenEye, where you'd have 4 of you around a TV screen, and you would be nudging each other, you would be screaming, you would be laughing. That's a very special experience. And today, when we think of multiplayer, it has very much become the accepted standard seems to be online multiplayer. You sit on your own, you have a headset, and you could be talking to people on the other side of the world, but physically you're disconnected from them. It's less of a kind of social space, and I think that's something that there's room to bring back. I mean, I'm not saying that online multiplayer is a bad thing by any means. I'm a big player of Street Fighter 4, and I love the fact that I can go online at any point in time and play against someone who is roughly the same standard as me. That's brilliant. In games that are a kind of test of skill, then that's a big step forward for gaming, to be able to have that sort of instant high-quality competition without having to have a group of friends who plays the game exactly as much as you do. But that social side of things, that's something that not only I feel has been, I guess in a way, forgotten, but also we have so much more potential to do things with it. We have motion controls, which we see being used in JS Joust, if you've ever played it, a game for 6 move controllers, which is essentially you're trying to keep your move controller as still as you can, which means moving everyone else without moving yourself. We've got technology such as touchscreens, which are these just big interactive canvases that you can fit 2 pairs of hands on. It's wonderful. These offer an opportunity for new shared experiences, and so I think there is a bright future here. A couple of games that really spring to mind in terms of shared multiplayer design on the iPad are Fingal from Game Oven and Chicanery, which I'll go into a bit of detail on. Fingal is a game where 2 players share an iPad. They have these sort of squares on screen, and they need to move them so that they match up with the squares on the board which are moving around. And it's very obvious once you're playing that you really need 2 people to play it. You can't beat these puzzles unless you have someone to cooperate with. But the puzzles, it's not so much about trying to solve the problem on the screen. It's trying to solve, how do we fit our hands around each other's hands to actually make it work? And you find yourself rubbing your hands against each other, getting awkwardly close to each other in order to beat these puzzles. And that's a really funny experience, sharing that kind of awkwardness with a friend, a partner, or a complete stranger. You come away with a shared personal experience, something, that kind of social experience you wouldn't get otherwise if you weren't kind of physically invading each other's space. Chicanery, Anna Antropy did the original, and Bennett Foddy did the port for iPhone and iPad, is a very interesting game where each player, it's for up to 4 players, each player puts their finger on a corner of the screen. And as long as you keep your finger there, the guillotine's not going to drop down and chop your character's head off. And the last player to still have a character with a head wins the game. So the real game is about trying to push each other so that they lift their finger off the screen. And what you get is you get this whole wide possibility space of different actions that you can do in the game, different ways that you can interact, not with the board, but with each other, be it physically pushing each other, grabbing each other, tickling each other, or using kind of verbal tricks to, trick them into thinking their phone's going off and it's really important or whatever, so that, things like that. That's a kind of infinite possibility space there of different ways that you can interact with each other. It's wide, and it offers players a chance to use their creativity and their imagination. So we have this sense of exploring personal space, of that kind of social interaction that comes from the physical, from physically getting into each other's comfort zones, I guess. We've also got games where players are part of the play space, where the kind of physical presence of a hand on the board acts like a barrier or a wall or a bit of level or a pipe or whatever. If it was Mario, the hands and the bodies become physical game elements. And we've also got a great opportunity to create stories between players, to get them to bond, to get them to come away with a shared memory and something that hopefully they will be talking about and remember as an experience that they shared. We get players to use their creativity in terms of how they're going to interact with each other in the real world, like I was talking about with chicanery. And we're also giving players an opportunity to take this kind of gaming into new environments. Gaming, sharing gaming doesn't have to be something that you do in front of a TV anymore. It's something that you can do in the pub. It's something that you can do on the train. It's something that you can do at a family event. You can do it at the dinner table. You can do it at the breakfast table. Just wherever. You can take these devices anywhere, so you can have this kind of shared interpersonal experience anywhere, and as such, you can have it with people that you wouldn't be sharing these experiences with otherwise. So in terms of Slamjet Stadium, what did this mean for the design? How did I kind of bring this methodology into the game that I made? Well, the first thing was to not divide the space into different sides. All you need in the game design is you need to be able to keep score between the two players. Or if it's cooperative, you don't even need that. You just need to be able to tell which player has X number of points and which player has Y number of points and where they're going to get that. So you don't need to split the board into sides. This is something from a kind of controller age where you had your controller, I had my controller, we're both plugged into the TV, controlling an avatar, and if you stole the controller from my hand, that would kind of kill the pace of the game, because I can't do anything if I don't have a controller in my hand. You don't have that with a tablet. You take the tablet out of my hand, I'd move closer to the tablet. When you've got an interaction that is very sort of simple and tangible, that's not an issue because you can quite quickly get back into it if it's moved away from you. And you get this freedom of movement around the board. You don't have half a game board each, or if you're playing 4-player, you get a quarter of a game board each. You get the whole thing. The players are sharing the entire space between them, which means that you get to enjoy this, this large interactive screen that is provided by the tablet. And like I said, this whole overlap, this whole, getting in each other's way is a social experience, so give people an opportunity to make the most of that. Another thing I wanted to make sure that there wasn't in the game was any form of refereeing. I wanted to allow players to cheat creatively, because this is a whole part of, like chicanery by Ananthropy, which I was talking earlier, how you interact in the real world, in the physical space, is creative. So let players come up with that for themselves. And that means often it is possible in a game design to be able to put in things to stop people from cheating. To say, oh, people are just going to push each other around, so if I put in this barrier here, then that's going to separate them and they're not going to do that. Well, no, let them do it. An example that came into the design of Slamjet Stadium was the idea of not awarding points for own goals, so that you couldn't so that you couldn't, you could steal each other's characters to move the ball about around the board, but it still mattered which characters you chose, because if you hit it into the goal, you needed to use your own character. And in a way, that was kind of interesting because it also added an opportunity to block your goal. It gave you kind of defensive options as well. But it was too complex. It was too complicated. It wasn't instant enough. And it killed the pacing. There was a kind of sense of kind of disappointment, I guess, when you think you should have scored legitimately and then the game disallowed it. So I decided just to keep it manic and crazy, and just give the players free rein in that respect, and not try to cordon it off, because I want to keep the pacing up, keep that flow up, keep it constantly moving. And then when you get these, when you leave it to the player to come up with their own rules, then that's another way that the player can be creative with the game you've given them. You can give the player their opportunities to come up with their own interpretation of your game by coming up with house rules. And of course, house rules are there to be broken because you're relying on each other to police it. So if you decide, okay, you can only use the red characters, I'll only use the blue characters, and then you find yourself using your opponent's characters, and if they can let you get away with it, then that's kind of fun. Cheating is something that I wanted to encourage. I wanted to get people to actively cheat. So on the loading screens, you'll see signs like this, giving you effectively serving suggestions. They also suggest ways that, not just ways that you can cheat, but also suggesting ideas for different house rules that you can employ, like playing 2 against 1, or playing on the back of bicycles and with a real football and trying to recreate the game in your back garden. Cheating is a form of expression. You can show who you are by playing dirty. I play a lot of Carcassonne with my friends, and they know me. My personality when I'm playing games is someone who will poach things at any opportunity. If I see an opportunity to steal castles and things, if you've ever played a game, I guess you'll get what I'm talking about, I will take it. And this game is giving me an opportunity to express my personality. I like to think that I'm not a massively unfair or nasty or Machiavellian character in real life, but when I'm in the game, I get to be this guy. And by giving players an excuse to cheat off each other, then you're giving them an excuse to express themselves. You can have the schadenfreude of when you feel like you've won something, but you really shouldn't have, but you kind of got away with it because you broke the house rules and no one noticed. And then you can gloat about it because you won and you really shouldn't have, but they let you get away with it. And then you get the underdog mentality as well. If you just lost a point because someone else broke the house rules, then you got to make a comeback. You've got to do better. You've got to prove that you're above them. It's exciting. It's fun. Now, from a kind of practical design perspective, one thing that I'd found with greedy bankers was that kind of center line on the board there, on the left-hand side, between the red side of the board and the blue side of the board, if you can see it, roughly where the player is. Everything that crosses over that center doubles in value because you've stolen it. And what happened in the game is because you had this one point of focus, which was this middle ground, that players knew they could get the most value out of, that really, in a lot of cases, you would get players essentially kind of fighting over that one bit of ground for the whole thing, and whoever's the most aggressive in that area tended to win just by effectively bullying their way to victory. And as much as I love the kind of the physicality of that, I did think the problem with that is you get a stalemate, and you get some players end up playing a little bit too rough, and I kind of didn't like that. And it was something I wanted to change with the new game. And what I did with Slamjet Stadium to kind of fix this is make the focal point in the game is the ball. And the ball is something that you can't interact with. The only way you can interact with the ball is by throwing a player at it. So you don't have control over that focal point. And that focal point is moving around the screen all the time because it keeps on getting hit. So there's never a point where you're both focusing on one thing and the player who can defend that area most aggressively will win. Because if you've got someone holding one character and charging up a shot, to shoot the ball into the goal, you've got 3 other characters that you could grab for yourself, and if you're quick enough, you could bash that ball out of the way. So there are always more than one routes of access. Wherever the player's hands are, there's somewhere else that you can go. So that the game keeps flowing. It's not just about aggression, it's about smart movement as well as rough movement. And finally, I made a conscious decision not to worry too much about balance in the game. When we design kind of competitive multiplayer games, like our StarCrafts, our Street Fighters, and Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, balance is very important to players. Players, like to know that every game is fair. But in a way, if you make it deliberately unfair in this social setting, you get a lot more moments of laughter. You get a lot more kind of those crazy surprises that come up, that anger that comes up. Oh, that's so unfair, you shouldn't have won. It's just adding to the volume, the sort of excitement of that social experience. And as well as that, so that on the top right-hand side, that's the power-up, the sort of center circle in the middle of the board. If you touch that, you'll activate a power-up. And a lot of the power-ups are practically instant goals. And after all that bashing characters around, the idea that you can get a goal just by pressing the center circle at the right time, that's madness. Like, how can that be good? But what it does is you've had players concentrating on moving these physics objects around a board for the past minute, and then suddenly something comes up in the center, and they've got to change where they're paying attention to. And they're stopping paying attention to that kind of physical control, and now it's all about timing, and they've got to make sure that they're the one who hits the thing at the right time. And if they spot it before the other player does, then that gives them an advantage. So you've got this change of pacing where the way that the sort of prime way, the optimal way to interact with the game sort of changes in a split second. And you've also got a change in the kind of movements that you're expecting from the players and the kind of way they're paying attention to it. If you can create these moments, create these periods in the game where it just switches and something completely off the ball happens, then that creates the laughter, that creates those moments that people go away talking about, oh, remember the time when that happened. And when you've got a shared experience, when you've got a social experience, in the pub or whatever, that's what you want. That's what's special. It's not, we went to the pub and we found out that that Steve was the strongest player, or we went to the pub and Steve got a massive gust of wind to throw 3 balls into the goal at once, and just we thought he was losing and then just won immediately. It was like, oh my God. That's what you want people to go home talking about, because those are those kind of social memories. So really, the key things that I learned from making the game, from testing the game, from taking it to the pub, about really the design of the project as a whole and the design of shared screen tablet games as a whole. Firstly, there isn't necessarily a reason to split the board into parts. Let players move freely around the board, let them have control of the whole space. This is one big iPad, it's not 4 little iPhones. So if you can give players an opportunity to use that whole space, then that's physically exciting. Let them break rules. Players love to break rules. Players love to break the system. Players love to feel that they're getting away with something that the computer shouldn't really let them do. And if you can give players an opportunity to do that, then they're going to love you for it, or at least they're going to love the game for it, and that's really what you want, is you want them to love the game. Focus on keeping the flow constant. Don't let the physicality become a barrier in a way. And that's all about, I guess it's all about where the focus of the gameplay is. It is possible that the kind of physical interactions clashes against the game world interactions, and you need to focus on trying to make these two things work together in harmony. And finally, focus on these moments, focus on getting people to laugh and scream and shout and think of smart things on the fly, because those are the things they're going to go away talking about. So, I've spoken mostly about my own work, really, to kind of give an example of the design process behind these kind of games and really what I feel are the important design challenges and design issues. But on a broader scope, what is the future for tablet gaming like this, where people are sharing the game board and playing in the same space, sharing this experience physically, not being kind of disconnected or whatever. Well, firstly, the tablet is a great device to be making these games for, because they are getting more and more common, more and more popular, and they are appearing in more and more houses, rucksacks, handbags, pockets, wherever you keep them, and you take them around wherever you go. With that, you've got a wide open space of people who have these devices that they can enjoy these experiences on. And as a developer, you've got relatively easy distribution to these devices. You don't have to worry about shipping them or whatever. And traditionally, these are in a way, these are a lot like board games. This is, they share a lot in common with things like Hungry Hungry Hippos or whatever. Actually, someone did refer to greedy bankers as Hungry Hungry Hippos with money. So if you were to make your own indie Hungry Hungry Hippos, the cost to distribute that, the cost to build all the parts, it would be so much that no one would get to play it. Whereas with tablets, you can distribute it easily, so you can share these new experiences easily, and you don't have to get new kit for it. You don't need to get specialized controllers for it, because everyone has these interactive spaces which are great for having multiple hands on, and that's it. It's one object. There's no extra add-ons that you need. And we're also seeing, I think, a growing interest in sharing multiplayer gaming within the games culture. We've got events like Wild Rumpus. We've got events like Local Multiplayer Picnic, which I think is in the Netherlands. I think they did one in Berlin recently. We've got events like Game City in Nottingham, where indie developers are getting an opportunity to show their work in a public space, which is intended for the public, not specifically for gamers, but for families and for local people, and show interesting things that gaming can do. And there's this growing kind of interest in, well, what can we do next? What can we do now? And I think that's interesting. I think a lot of people are hungry to see what we can do by sharing multiplayer gaming as a physical experience. So, I guess that's all that I have that I would like to say at this point. But really, I guess it's time to turn the questions to you and see what you would like to ask. So if you do have questions, please do let me know. If not, you've got my email address, you've got my Twitter handle. Please do get in touch, or just find me out, here at the conference, and I'd love to chat.
Thanks, Alistair. That's great. I am going to take on the role of throwing this thing around again. So, do we have any questions for Alistair? There you go. I'll just give it to you.
I want to break it again. Hi.
Hi.
Have any tablets actually been destroyed while playing those games?
None of my own. Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand that that is something that people may have concerns about. I have largely left it up to players to decide how they want to enforce their own iPad safety. I certainly have managed to keep all my iPads unscathed during the development and taking it to events and things, so hopefully you shouldn't need to worry too much.
Maybe you should just include a disclaimer, just in case.
Maybe, I don't know.
Fantastic.
Me again. And when we've talked about this with Slamjet, the difficulty of monetizing a game which requires effectively an appointment to play is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you've done both a paid and a free version. Have you learnt anything since our conversations about, what the effects of how to try and make this a revenue model? Or is it better just to focus it on making it just a great game as it is?
I think, yeah, I mean, the way I approached monetization was in the design phases, I let the game design, take precedence. The first and foremost, I wanted to make a great game, and I will find a monetization system that fits around that. And as such, I guess I did play around with different monetization systems or different ways that it could monetize, but what I really found from experimenting with kind of in-game credits and reward systems, with a game that is this kind of chaotic, it's hard to feel that you're kind of giving players a meaningful advantage by getting them to pay for extra in-game content. It's in a way, it's a lot more kind of toy-like, and as such, you want to be able to give players all the pieces and say, right, have your fill, work out what bits of these pieces work best for you. There is always a possibility of selling, selling extra characters and stages and essentially extra add-on parts for the game. From my understanding of freemium models, it typically it's one of these things that tends to work if you've got consumable materials, and I never really found any kind of consumable materials that would make sense for the game. So it was one of these, the game design really kind of led it down a path where it made most sense to have a paid version and a demo, and that's the way I approached it. Anyone else?
Just a question for you personally as an indie developer yourself. What for you has been the most difficult time you've gone through, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, that's it's an interesting one. I mean, through my work so far as a developer, the hardest bit has been getting exposure. Getting people to know about your work, to talk about your work, and that's something I've worked very hard on in terms of trying to get out there, talk to the games press, talk to magazines, go to conferences, meet people, make connections, always look for new opportunities, look for places to showcase your work, and that's, for me, personally, that's been the biggest challenge. I guess in a way, it's the entrepreneurial challenge. And that's something like I got into game development 10 years before I graduated and then started this business. Like, I'd been making games for a good 10 years. and in a way, I had a rough idea, you know, I had an idea of what the beats and the shortfalls and the challenges and the kind of the pacing and all things like that of making a game. But in terms of trying to sort of sell your work as a business and make a living out of it, that's a big challenge. And that's something I still continue to, you know, push on with. And, you know, it's a battle that is never won. But you know, you just got to keep on fighting it and trying to get exposure wherever you can. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And hi.
Yeah.
So I took a little time to look up your games on Google Play, and apparently you didn't publish them on there.
Right.
So
yeah.
is there any reason for that?
Well, the game is. Yeah, it's only iPad at the moment. I guess the way I approached it was because it's a tablet game. At the moment, there's only kind of the iPad as a tablet is really the main one that you want to be focusing on because it has the biggest outreach and because I kind of understand sort of how the mechanics of the store work. I like the opportunity to make things multi-platform, and if I was to make it multi-platform, I probably would be going down the Unity route with it. But from making Greedy Bankers and Objective-C and using the Cocos 2D framework, I had a lot of experience in that area, making specifically for iOS. So really the decision was I could spend extra time learning new technology and learning new systems, and then going in and having, you know, the Google Play marketplace is a tough marketplace to work with, just like the App Store is, and to be going in there and only being able to access a fraction of the devices, you know, that's tough. Whereas if I made it for iOS, I would be able to just, you know, capitalize on all my existing expertise, jump straight into it, make the game the way I imagined it and the way I wanted it to be without having to work around all the technical challenges. And then, if it looked like it could be successful on other platforms as well, port it. That just, to me, made a bit more sense, I guess. Hope that's helpful.
Lovely. Well, Alistair, thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. As I lose my microphone, absolutely inspirational.
Thanks.